Hello and welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show, brought to you by Tissot, the official timing partners of the Tour de France and the Tour de France Femmes Avec Zwift. They also, finally, helped me get to work on time too, so thank you very much. Now, this week in the world of racing, we learned that the Tour de France Femmes Avec Zwift went to script and was all the better for it. The greatest of all time, Marianne Vos, won the green jersey, 2 stages, and spent 4 days in yellow, as befitting her stature. And the strongest rider of her generation, Annemiek van Vleuten, started on the back foot with illness, but rode through it to duly dominate the overall standings and claim the final yellow jersey. We also learned, though, that the peloton couldn't escape the massive high-speed crashes that characterised the opening week of the men's Tour de France. They spelt the end to the hopes of Marta Cavalli, Emma Norsgaard and Lorena Wiebes, who had taken the 2-bunch sprints with impressive ease beforehand, amongst a host of the big-name riders to leave the race early. Frankly, though, once Van Vleuten got going on stage 7, it was hard to imagine anyone really ever challenging her for the overall victory. In fact, many are calling it the greatest ride of her career. The Dutch woman put the peloton to waste before the live TV pictures had even started rolling, and when we did get to see her, there was just Demi Vollering clinging onto her back wheel. It wasn't long before the Movistar rider shook off the brave resistance of Vollering, going solo with 62 kilometres left to ride and eventually coming home almost 3.5 minutes ahead of the SD Works leader. Behind, it was simply carnage as riders came to the finish in 1s and 2s. Not only did Van Vleuten take her first stage of the race, she took control of the yellow jersey, of course, and in convincing fashion, overcoming the deficit she'd accrued after struggling with that illness on the deceptively tough stages day 2 and 3. After that ride, only Vollering began the final day within 4 minutes of Van Vleuten's lead, and it was no surprise to see the world's best climber wrap up her Tour de France Femmes Avec Zwift title on Sunday's summit finish at La Superplanche de Belleville. The Dutch rider extended her lead in the overall standings, crossing the finish line 30 seconds ahead of Vollering, who did keep hold of the polka dot jersey. Now, elsewhere in the racing world, down in the Basque Country of Spain, Remco Evenepoel was also looking stronger than ever. Fresh and lean from an altitude training camp, he quickly laid the World Tour field to waste. On the penultimate climb of the day, a soft attack quickly shelled all but Simon Yates from his wheel, but as the Belgian slowly upped the gears as the climb unfolded, Yates found the pace too much and relented. Alone with 44 kilometres to ride, Evenepoel was undaunted and simply pushed home his advantage, eventually crossing the finish line a little under 2 minutes ahead of his closest competitor, Pavel Sivakov of Ineos Grenadiers. Now, that 44k solo break is even more than his 30 kilometres solo at Liège-Bastogne-Liège earlier in this year. Some armchair number crunchers have speculated that it's Remco's best climbing performance to date. But for me, it's the length of time solo, as with Van Vleuten up in France, that are the real standouts from their incredible performances. Because for many, many years, we've not typically seen rides like that, or at least not with the regularity that we're getting at the moment. If it's not Van Vleuten or Evenepoel, it's Wout van Aert or Tadej Pogacar, who incidentally started Clásica de San Sebastián but was dropped and then abandoned. And of course, who can forget the rides from the Trek Segafredo duo Lizzie Deignan and Elisa Longo Borghini at the past 2 Paris-Roubaix Femmes. So why is that? Why are we seemingly getting to watch such selective races with such standout lone winners, the likes of which are reminiscent of Merckx or Eno? Are race tactics going old school? Well, I asked around. One of the possible explanations is based around equipment, principally aerodynamics. It's that much harder to bring back a rider who's on a bike and using equipment that's not far off a full time trial rig. The speeds that an aero-optimised rider can sustain on their own are so high now that chasing riders will have to put out significantly more power to close that gap. And if the riders chasing aren't at the same level as the leader down the road, the gaps just grow. And bear in mind that a rider like Remco Evenepoel is incredibly aerodynamic, even on his road bike. So while it might be giving us old school racing, it's definitely not an old school reason. However, it's also definitely not the only reason either. Race motorbikes have long had the potential to influence race results, but I think that teams and riders are more aware of the significance of them. Perhaps they watched the GCN Does Science video that Dan filmed 5 years ago. Either way, the knowledge that you have an advantage with even a single motorbike 10 metres ahead of you can give a rider that bit more confidence to go early, therefore influencing tactics. And even the timings and the locations of a rider's attack can factor in race motorbikes too. Now, it might not seem ideal or perhaps not what we want from racing, but remember that it's at least the same for any rider out front. Now, another suggestion that was thrown in there was that race organisers are creating courses and routes that have less wide, flat roads, purposely favouring breakaways and lone riders. So some of the mountain stages in the Tour this year, for example, had barely any flat. Races like Paris-Roubaix have always had glorious solo breakaways, and so the two editions of the women's race I mentioned a moment ago have simply mirrored that. But perhaps it serves as an illustration of how a race route can routinely affect race tactics. Now, I'm not suggesting that we have pavé in every race or gravel either, but clearly the same effects can be gained to some extent at least by climbing. Then lastly, there's the question of tactics and fatigue. We all well know what power certain riders can produce per kilo of body weight and for how long as well. But what's less well known and less well understood is the effect of fatigue and specifically the resistance to it. But races are increasingly so hard from so early these days, perhaps it's playing more of a role in the outcome of races. It's what separates the best from the best in monuments and grand tours, and whilst there's a much higher level across the board among pro cyclists these days, perhaps resistance to fatigue is what's going to land you the big wins and in the old style. And if that is the case, you'd have to think that's about as Merckxian as it gets. Now let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Why are we getting such impressive solo wins these days? Now I did, of course, check in with our chief statistician Killian Kelly on this one late last night. His mental algorithms crunched the numbers through the night and he's duly delivered this morning. In just the men's world tour, statistically there have been more solo wins this year than in any other year in the last 20, except for 2013. And while in that period only 10 races have been won solo by over a minute, 2 have been Remco Evenepoel this year. 5 of them, incidentally, came from just one rider. See if you can guess who that was. I'll tell you the answer later. But now back to the racing from last week. A long, long way behind Remco Evenepoel in Spain. Pavel Sivakov's second place was a result of great teamwork between the Frenchman and the recently crowned Spanish national champion Carlos Rodriguez. However, it was Jumbo-Visma's Thijs Benoot who rounded out the podium in third, one of the few riders who'd raced the Tour de France to then be up at the sharp end of the Clásica de San Sebastián. That ride confirmed his form from his impressive teamwork in support of Vingegaard. And talking of form, we've got to wonder now if Evenepoel can finally get the result we suspect he's capable of in a Grand Tour. La Vuelta starts in less than 3 weeks, remember. Meanwhile, Juan Ayuso won a 4-up sprint at the Circuito de Getxo on Sunday afternoon to secure the first win of his career at just 19 years of age. While the 196.5-kilometre one-day race from Bilbao to Getxo didn't test the riders with the steep climbs that the Clásica de San Sebastián had done a day earlier, the undulating parcours was still tough enough to thin down the pack after 5 25-kilometre laps of a hilly circuit. The riders then battled it out along part of next year's Tour de France Stage 1 route that included the 2 toughest climbs of the day. With 8k to go, the UAE Team Emirates rider with Valentin Ferrand bridged across to the breakaway duo of Wilco Kelderman and Andrea Piccolo after dropping the rest of the peloton on the final categorised climb. The Spaniard then had the legs to outsprint the rest of the group on the final ramp to the line, with Piccolo and Kelderman taking 2nd and 3rd places respectively. Ayuso will also be one to watch if he lines up for his potential Grand Tour debut at La Vuelta a España. And sticking with Vuelta news, or rumours I should say, Egan Bernal has been mentioned by the boss of the race, Javier Guillen, as a potential starter. Pro Cycling Stats also has him down on the start list, and if he is there, that would certainly be some story. And you will, of course, be able to enjoy the race live on GCN+, but there's plenty more to savour on GCN+ before then. Don't forget, there's our weekly World of Cycling show on Wednesday, but ahead of that, on Tuesday, the Vuelta a Burgos starts. Each stage will be live at 1400 BST between Tuesday and Sunday, with the likes of João Almeida, Alejandro Valverde and Jai Hindley vying for the title. The CEC Tour Féminin International des Pyrénées begins on Friday and will be live each day until Sunday. Those not in the Pyrenees may be heading to the Post-Nord-Vargarda Westsveden women's stage race, with the road race on Sunday following Saturday's team time trial. Don't forget that territory restrictions may apply to all those races, so do check what you can watch where you are. Although everyone on GCN Plus can watch the documentaries, and this week we've got the director's cut of my 360k gravel adventure, King Alfred's Way, in a day. King Alfred's Way is a long-distance route, and it's just a work of genius, if you ask me.
The riding is so good. I don't think I've ever ridden gravel anywhere else in the world that's like this. This is quite a tough little climb.
King Alfred's Way is a 350-kilometre time travel gravel route around the archaeological, historical and cultural heart of the south of England.
I've actually stopped for this very solemn moment. I wouldn't want you to miss one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, Stonehenge. Can you see it? What do you mean it's not very impressive? Zoom in. Yeah, there you go.
I can remember that being an absolute nightmare to get up. Probably the bit that I least enjoyed of the whole route.
My body was kind of shutting down. I was dehydrated, but I just didn't want to drink anything. I went to put my GoPro away and I just completely lost it and stacked it. Now, our final race of the week will be the Tour of Leuven, also known as the Memorial Jeff Sherrans, on Sunday. Now, this will be the 55th edition of the Belgian one-day race that's named after the Belgian track legend and 7-time sprint world champion. Can Arnaud Delis take another victory to help the World Tour survival hopes of Lotto Soudal? He notched up another just last week at the Tour de Wallonie, beating Biniam Girmay on stage 3. Davide Ballerini won stage 4. The quick-step Alpha Vinyl sprinter spent the day in the breakaway before being caught by the peloton and then impressively proceeding to show everyone a clean pair of heels, taking his first victory since last year's Omloop Het Nieuwsblad. But it was Robert Stannard who sewed up his first overall victory as a professional on the final day by finishing second to stage 5 winner Jan Bakelants. Stannard was considered to be one of the most promising young riders in the world as he broke through the ranks with Team Bike Exchange, and I, for one, will be looking forward to seeing how the 23-year-old kicks on from here. OK, that is it for this week, a whistle-stop tour through the world of racing, other than to say it was Fabian Cancellara who won 5 of those 10 races solo by over a minute. I'll see those of you with GCN Plus subscriptions on the world of cycling this week, and to all of you, enjoy the week of racing. Bye for now.